out. He had cataract surgery today. All went well, thankfully. But I will sit in on his behalf for tonight. And so we'll call the meeting to order. We certify we do have a quorum with our planning board members. And the next item on the agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry. There's somebody coming in, but we may want to mention he's missing.
Okay,
Actually, we have one coming in as we speak.
okay, we won't name him now.
I'll make it.
You're only slightly tardy, Bill.
Make it here.
So we're missing Eric Braun, the chairman, due to surgery. And so I guess that's an excused absence by the policy.
Actually, we're going to need to vote to excuse it, but yeah.
Yeah. And otherwise, everyone else is present.
Okay, we need to go ahead and make a motion.
That would be correct.
Okay, I want to make a motion that Eric be excused from today's meeting due to his surgery.
I'll second.
We have a motion second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay, the motion carries unanimously. Eric is excused. The next item will be the adoption of the agenda. Does anybody have anything, any edits, additions, or modifications to the agenda? All right, seeing none, we will move forward with the agenda as written. Now we'll go to the minutes, and staff informed me, even though I didn't have a chance to read them, that the rest of y'all did. So we'll open the floor to any comments or amendments that may be necessary for the minutes from the February meeting.
Wish that we approve the minutes.
Okay, we have a motion to approve February minutes. Second by Bill. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that motion passes. February minutes are approved. Is there anybody here from the public that would like a chance to speak to the planning board or the staff this evening?
I signed up, so.
Okay,
but-
all right, good deal. Is there any old business from staff or the board members?
Ooh. No.
Good. Maybe we can set a planning board record tonight. I'm all in favor of that. Why not? Okay, moving into new business, which of you is going to discuss the planned training for us?
Me.
That will be our director. Well, he's coming up. You all remember to read your books you gave us last month?
That's not it.
Yep, had it covered.
I'm just reminding.
Not it. I hope you did read them, but no, that's not it at all. Thank you for being here this evening. We are going to have a series of training exercises over the next several months. And I'm certainly going to say we're going to start tonight. We wanted to bring you all some information that you don't generally get or have. I'm gonna close this door. I'm getting more sun. Okay, feel better now. All right, that helps a little bit. Okay, so generally speaking, when you go to a demographic profile of a community, what you're actually looking at or what you're actually being told is about information that's collected every 10 years in the US Census. That is not what we're going to talk about tonight at all. There is a separate census that actually comes out every 3 years, and it is a community profile that is actually assembled by the same agencies in the state. It's the Office of Budget and Management. At the federal level, it is the US Census Bureau. But what makes this particular census different, and the reason why I want you all to pay special attention to the information I'm giving you tonight, is that this is a census that is slightly different. You get a permit to do something to your house, or you get a permit to build a new house, or when someone gets a permit to construct a new house or a new neighborhood, that information once a month is transmitted from the building inspector over to the state Office of Budget and Management. And then every single October, that information is also transmitted to the US Census Bureau. They also collect demographic data in places where you wouldn't think about it. If you were my age or you were older, there are a few people on earth who are a little bit older. Many of you probably remember making purchases with something that we used to call cash. And when you did cash purchases, those cash purchases were very, very private. What I'm discovering these days is that all the cool kids walk around with debit and credit cards, which of course makes you feel very cool and very with it. The thing that you're probably missing when you're using those is that you are contributing to the data that is being mined from the way that you live, that is being presented to the Census Bureau. And that is where a lot of tonight's information comes from. So regardless of if you shop at Amazon or if you shop at Walmart or if you drive 150 miles or if you go on a trip, actually your trips and your activities where you purchase your clothes, every single one of those things goes into information that is provided to a variety of agencies. One of those agencies used to compile their information in something called a leakage report. What a leakage report did was it determined what things you needed in order to live in a particular place. And then it was a comparison of what you could do locally versus what you had to do somewhere else. And there was no Amazon when this started. So this was a very long time ago, but it only became less relevant more recently when they stopped publishing those reports. So when I say to you tonight, most of the information that we're going to talk about, I'm not reporting to you the information that people may have either accurately or inaccurately provided at the time of the census. I'm talking to you about the American Community Profile. And one of the things that the Community Profile actually captures that may not be obvious is there are people who do not volunteer to fill out a census because they have an issue with citizenship, or they may live in a place for a little while and then live in another place for another little while. And they may not normally fit in the category of people who stay in a place long enough to end up on the census. It could be that your church or your child's school is not doing nearly the job that your credit card or your debit card is doing in identifying who lives in your house and how you spend your money. And that information is going to come up tonight. So I want to tell you some community characteristics that we're going to learn about this evening. The median age for Chapel Hill and Durham is 38.1, and our median age, is 40. But I want to make sure that y'all see that nearly 60% of our population is between the ages of 18 and 58. So this is a young population. I hear an awful lot in planning about things we need to do for seniors. I want you to look at the group that we need to be doing the most for, which is the majority of the population. Those people are not senior citizens. Now, as far as racial makeup, this is one of the most confusing parts of demographic information, because if you're Hispanic or Latino, or you're Native American Indian, or you are one or more nationalities, or you may represent one or more ethnic minorities, you're listed if you are at least some portion Caucasian or you're some portion African American. You sort of get lumped into two groups. So one of the more surprising things, if you happen to be around a demographic and you find out that 69% of a population is white, but you find yourself in Morrisville, you're going, wow, there's an amazing number of Indians here from India. Those people are counted in the group of white people. So just because you are a person of color does not mean you get counted as a person of color. So even though we have a 69% to 21% with a few other possibilities in there, we have 40% non-white, which includes Latino, Hispanic, Native American. And certainly when you go out into our ETJ area, the number of Hispanic, Latino folks who English is a second language that amplifies significantly. It's not about farming so much as it's just about where people actually live. Now, I want to say females in our town outnumber males. 63% of the residents of Pittsburgh are female. So if you're recently single, you may want to keep that in mind. Or if you're getting ready to become recently single, you might want to keep that in mind. Back when I started planning school, back right after the earth cooled, I was going to point out that the average household was something in the 3.5 something or another to 4 I give up. 2.3 is the average persons per household. Here statewide is 2.5. So when you see us doing demographic projections, or you start talking about us counting for the school system wants to hear that there's 5 kids in your house so that they can ask the county commissioners for an awful lot more money to support school programs. Actually, the likelihood of being a nuclear family, a man, a woman, married to each other with 3 kids is very unlikely here. Now, the per capita and the median household income are roughly identical to the state of North Carolina. And that sort of comes from the fact that the Chapel Hill, Durham, metropolitan area has a really high income, and our income is lower, but we're still exactly just about identical to the state of North Carolina. So you all are what I would call typical, which is not a bad thing. Now, only 8.6% of our residents fall below the poverty line. Statewide, it's almost 14%. So I want to say you have people who have a little bit more disposable income than you might expect, and they're mostly females. And you're going to see as we move along, they're also mostly single. Next. Okay, now let's talk about 2 things that don't sound like they belong in the same basket. Average commute. If you live here, in all likelihood, you fall into one of 2 categories. You either drive about 30 minutes to work, or you work from home. 13% of the town is actually full-time workers from home. That is actually down from the pandemic, but up, and actually statewide, it's actually fairly high. So I want to point out the types of work that you do here, chances of being able to work from your house are better than average. Now, educational attainment, obviously 95% of the people who live here, work here, have graduated from high school, which is 95 is pretty high. Less than 4% have no degree, including high school diploma. 45% of the people in town have a bachelor's degree or higher. Chatham County, it's 20%. So in town, the likelihood of having a bachelor's degree is pretty high. 70% of our population lives in single-family residential homes, not townhouses, not duplexes, not apartments. 61% of the people who live here own the home that they live in, and that is subject to change. There's a lot of things that can change that, and we're going to talk about that. Now, probably the most shocking item I found in the 2022, which is the newest one, they will come out with one later this year or maybe next year, is that only 5% of long-term renters become homeowners over the course of a lifetime. So your chances of becoming a homeowner, if you have had the habit of renting for 10 or more years, you're likely to stay in a rental situation the rest of your life. There's a lot of reasons for that. Don't want to rule out one of the most obvious ones, which is mobility. Back in the day, back when I bought my first house, which was before some people in here were born, but I'll call out the year anyway. It's 1987, and put a lot of pressure on my parents. They just helped my brother and sister-in-law buy a house, and they were like, well, when you get married, I said, no, I want the same opportunity they had. So they arranged for me to have the down payment for a house. When I bought my house, most people stayed in a house 25 to 28 years nationally. Right now, it's 7 years. And actually, a lot of people sell in the first 5 years, and there's a variety of things that cause that to happen. But it's sort of like being married. After about the 7th or 8th year, statistically, you're going to tough it out and make it to 25. You might make it to 50. You can make it longer than that, and you can make it feel longer than that all along the way. But I was just going to say that the average home buyer in this county remains in place less than 7 years. A lot of times people's circumstances change. We're going to talk about changing circumstances in just a minute. And you might find that your circumstances change. We are one slide too many. Did we lose one of my slides? Yeah, nope. Okay, apparently it got missing. I'm going to go to one that didn't apparently make it to this slide set. So one of the things that we spend a lot of time talking about in our office is the most common number of bedrooms for any kind of housing around here. One bedroom is only 8%. There's a really low chance, even if you're renting an apartment, that's going to have one bedroom. 2 to 3 bedrooms is 76.6. That's a lot. That's about, 3/4 of the houses have, or structures have 2 to 3 bedrooms. 4 or more is only 15%. So when you get up above 4 bedrooms, it's highly unlikely. Now let's talk about household characteristics. Married couple household, 40% of the households in the town, or 39-ish. Male householder, no spouse present, family household, which means this is a guy who has kids that he is the custodial parent of. That's 13% of the population. Female householder, no spouse present, family household, which means she's a custodial parent. That's 41%. Married, not separated, men, 51.8%. Women, married, not separated, 27.6. Never married, men, 41%, women, 42%. So let me just say, a lot of single people. I think I said that at the beginning. One more slide. All right, nationwide statistics, because I want to compare us to other places. And I want to tell you why all this information is important. When we are actually doing planning, the question that comes up most often in our office is, am I planning for a population I think is coming? Am I planning for a population that's already here? Am I planning for a population that used to be here and I'm still holding on to an idea from long ago? And the answer is yes, all the above. But I'm going to say that when you find yourself sitting in front of 4 to 6 sets of house plans for over 55 housing, and you see that we have a population that won't be eligible for over 55 housing for 10 or more years, it kind of makes the emphasis in our office shift to, gosh, I wonder what young families, and in my definition of family, this is an adult with 1 or more custodial children, very different than the one that I grew up with. But remember, I was born a very long time ago. But let me just say, with that in mind, we really need to put a lot of emphasis in our department and certainly the projects that we bring to you all. In case you're wondering what our cheat sheet is, we're looking at who's here, who we anticipate coming here, and how long realistically people are going to hang around to actually age out into something. Bearing in mind that certainly if I was moving into an over 55 community and the houses start at $780,000, that could be a pill that's a little hard for me to swallow. I would probably become a renter again. All right, for nationwide statistics, I want to point out affordable housing, the way we're trying to define it, and certainly the way that you all should be thinking about it when you hear it, because it doesn't mean what you think it means. It means that 30% or less of your annual income pre-tax is spent on housing plus insurance plus utilities. So it isn't just your housing. It's how much is your water and sewer bill, or if you don't have a sewer bill, how much is your water bill? What are you spending on your utilities? Gas, if you have underground gas or you have propane, whatever it is you're heating your house with, if it isn't just electricity. And please remember, electricity is a utility as well. Unless you have solar panels and you're getting your electricity from wind energy, I'm going to guess that you need to include your utilities. So in case of affordable housing, you're considered cost burdened if greater than 30% of your household income is tied up in your rent or house payment plus your utilities. And this is an assumption that involves people who are earning 80 to 100% of the average monthly income here, which is also coincidentally the average monthly income for the whole state. So 2 earners, about $65-ish thousand, and you're basically trying to spend less than 30% on housing. In a lot of markets in really large cities, 55% is not unusual. The problem is it means you're putting a lot of things on a credit card, like your trip to the doctor's office or food. In the US, in 2023, less than 20% of all housing that was available to anybody, not for sale, but including the house you're living in, qualifies as affordable based on an 80 to 100% AMI. So only 20% of the housing that's available in America is actually in that category. And what's really interesting is there are some areas, I was reading about 2 this morning in the Wall Street Journal. One of them was Raleigh and the other one is Austin, Texas. And in both of those places, they have overbuilt to the point where rent has come down by somewhere between $500 and $900 a month. If you start thinking about rent starting out upwards of $2,000 to $2,300 a month and having it drop $900 because of this glut of housing on the market, I believe you will see that that is a significant trend. Unfortunately, when that trend happens, home prices also go down, which means if you bought your house at the top of the market, you're losing money. Now, I also want to discuss the phenomena of pandemic home buyers. Everybody remembers this. I'm pretty sure it was only 4 years ago. Even I can remember that. You had this, I can live anywhere and I can work from home. So you had a whole bunch of people moving to very far-flung places and running to the beach because I can put my laptop on the beach, use the free Wi-Fi, and I can do my IT job from the beach. Problem is, 4 years later, 2/3 of employers are now forcing workers back into the office at least 3 days per week. It's created a twofold problem. Buyer's remorse and commuting makes remote living harder. So I'm going to say you need to keep an eye on that. The other piece that I'm going to bring in here is I had certainly shared this with one or more of our colleagues. Generational values have changed. Younger generations are less likely to want to own. You want to have experiences. You're probably not going to want to have the experience of having a house tie you down. Also, if you change jobs fairly often, there's nothing quite like the mobility of not owning the house. So that's my piece. It's about demographics. I think I'm turning over to Eric at this point.
Afternoon. I set a timer for 15 minutes. If I go over that, I'll stop. Deal? So in terms of planning, I would like for you all to have in mind two concepts. There is current planning and there is future planning. Some of us dabble in historic planning, historic preservation and those types of stuff. We don't really have that much historic preservation in Pittsburgh. At least we don't have yet a historic district, so I won't touch into that at all. All right, check. In terms of understanding our current planning process, how do we do what we do? Look at, if you're coming in with a plan or any sort of development idea, what is the steps you go through? For me, it's important that we convey this to you in an effort for you all to help us to plan better for what we currently have, but also to anticipate what is going to come in the future. Now, in that process, we go through 5 steps, relatively speaking. The first one is a scoping meeting. You come in, you set an idea of what it is you want to do. You have a discussion. In many ways, no punches are hold. It's an open, frank discussion. This is what I want to do. This is what you can and cannot do. That's the gist of the discussion. You then go into a pre-submittal meeting. This is a bit more formal. You come in, you have a discussion with the planning department, engineering, the fire department, and the different agencies that govern building and development within a specific town. After that meeting, you then submit. It goes through the review processes. I'll jump into that a little bit later. And then you get an approval. 5 relatively simple, easy steps. Next, please. So what is our modus operandi for residential family, primarily single family? Now, firstly, we don't want to burden people who are trying to get a house or who are trying to build in any way. Or, as a matter of fact, somebody who is trying to put an accessory unit, or they want to build a garage, or they want to put a fence. For us, that is something we must help our people get through. And so, principally, we want to have a simplified development process, right? Because we are laymen and women, and we deserve a process that we can understand. So in that simplified process, we want to have a walkthrough with our planners. So you as an applicant can come in, you can have a discussion. Primarily in this case, it will be with someone like Ginger, who is doing an exceptional job in helping to walk the applicants through this process. Recently, we made a modification where we added, or we went almost complete now to a online platform called OpenGov, where if you are coming in, one, we're not going to take a paper from you because it creates a burden on us. And it also creates a burden on you in that it may be spaced, it may be lost, there's no automatic reminder. And in this new platform, you come in and everything is digital. Someone again like Ginger is going to help you through that process. And it helps us to better manage the process in a more seamless approach. You come in, you have a discussion, you do your submittal. We don't go through the pre-scope or scoping meetings. We try not to go through pre-submittal because understand that it's a more simplified route. You do your review processes, you get your approval. Thereafter, you would go to the county to do the building permits, right? And that's relatively what we're looking for in a single family. For commercial, it's a little bit different. Why? Because we want to ensure that the businesses that are coming into the community meets what it is that we want to have in our community, but also that they're not cutting corners and we can hold them to a slightly higher bar. Not too egregious, nothing too draconian in any way, just a slightly higher bar because we want to ensure what we have is what we need. So we do a scoping meeting where it's required, where it's necessary. You come in, you want to build a bar, you want to build a restaurant, you have a discussion with the planning department. Sometimes in the engineering department, you get an idea of what are the goals, what are the not safe areas to go on, and we try to meet in the middle. When you do your pre-submittal meeting, you should then have a better idea of what it is you are allowed to do versus what it is you're not allowed to do. And in that route, you don't slow the process down for yourself. Oftentimes what happens is that development or developers come in at the pre-submittal meeting with a fresh new idea that is then pushed back because they did not go through a scoping meeting. Sometimes this is not necessary to do a scoping meeting, but we find that when you do the scoping meeting, many times it helps to simplify the process and make it a bit more, really a lot more streamlined. You submit. Once you submit, you go through the review processes, again, engineering, planning, parks and recs, different departments. You get your approval, and then you go to the building department at the county. And at the end, when you get your building permit, you're going to get an inspection from the planning department where we would go out and ensure that what you said you were going to do is exactly what it is that you did. Also, many times what happens is when you do commercial, for instance, Hubies, let's use an example, the new car wash, they gave us sidewalks. We had to go out, inspect the sidewalk because we as a town do not want to inherit something that may or may not be damaged. So we need to make sure that what we're getting is not damaged. Again, it's a protection for ourselves, but also for the developers. Next one, John. Okay, so what are we looking for? Why are we doing this and what are we looking for? Effectively, we're making sure that there are consistency, but with what? We're wanting consistency with our Unified Development Ordinance or UDO. It has to meet and conform to what it is that we as a town adopted. Secondly, it has to be consistent with what we want in the future. Now, this is current planning coinciding future planning. It also has to be consistent with our comprehensive plans, comprehensive park plans, comprehensive pedestrian plans, comprehensive transportation plans, because DOT is going to have a plan that says, hey, this big road should go here, but Randy doesn't want to put the road there. He just wants to build a chicken coop. That's not consistent. We need to ensure that that doesn't happen so we can have a road that benefits us. That's why we need to have consistency with plans. At times, many of these plans are 10 years and then we need to renew them. Sometimes at year 9, we realize that plan that we wrote 9 years ago is not sufficient to satisfy what is the development projections. So we might need to modify these plans as we go on, as we continue. However, it still has to meet the general character, value, and overarching goals of the community. That is what the next consistency is that it has to be consistent with the overall value and character of the town or city that you're operating in. Second to last is that you want it to be, and this is not really a written rule. This is more something that is almost in it. It has to be consistent with demographic projections. Are we in a place that has baby bloomers, but we're not building parks? Is that consistent? Maybe, maybe not. We have to ask that question. Is it consistent that we are in a place that has no one that plays cricket, but we're building cricket parks or cricket fields? Is that consistent with the demographic projections? Maybe, maybe not. These are the things that we have to juggle. And lastly, you want to aim to cure social ailments. In some ways, affordability of home is one of the bigger ailments, but another ailment might be obesity, for instance. What are some of the things that we can do to help cure or at least help to address or arrest these ailments? One might be to keep in consistency with the parks and pedestrian and connectivity plans, where we're ensuring there is walkways, we're ensuring there is a place that someone can go and ride a bike or take a jog or do something that is more active, right? So these are things that we're looking for, but more specifically, if it's a site plan, things that we want to pay a little bit more mind to is what are the setbacks? Ideally and generally, setbacks are set in place to prevent fires and also to to increase some sort of privacy, right? We also looking at vegetation and landscaping. In many cases, you go to places and there is no sort of vegetation. It looks ugly, some might say, but you go to other places and you're like, damn, this is one of the most beautiful roads I've ever driven on. That is, again, because it's consistent with the vegetation plans. You want to look at parking. You want to look at the facades, and parking can be a double-edged sword. One, it can be where you have insufficient parking, but you can also have parking where it's too much parking. And then you create a dead zone, and it becomes a place where criminality happens and people get robbed and different things occur because you have big empty parking lot and no one ever uses it. Good, maybe not. We want to look at the facade. How many times you're driving and you see a building, everything is brick, and then there's just one big ugly vinyl building. That's controlled by facades. And again, you want to keep it, but you also want to create an opportunity for people to be creative and unique. Great example might be, right? It's this cute, quirky, weird, whatever place. Does it fit? Maybe not, but it works. It's kind of an identity now. You want to be able to allow for that to happen still, because we cannot write everything and we cannot control everything in a draconian manner. We have to have some level of flexibility. You also want to ensure there's garbage. We want to ensure that there's sewer and water. We also want to ensure that there's open space and parkland, primarily because these are all going to help us to achieve consistency. It also helps us to cure in many ways some, or at least to help some social ailments. And finally, it helps us to somewhat tie in to our projection of the future demographics, current demographics. Next one, John? Or is that it? Yeah, and lastly, I have 3 more minutes. Planning is an art form. Communities, canvases, planners are like paintbrushes, and our people are the artists. Only together it really makes sense. And that's why for me, it was really important for Randy to go first to kind of give an idea of what the demographics are. Because oftentimes we tend to exist in our own circle. And whatever that circle is great for us, but certain times it's great to see what other circles are like for us to be able to plan or help to plan those other circles too. And that would conclude this portion of our presentation. Any questions, comments?
Eric, and thank you, Randy. Any questions for Randy or Eric? I definitely have one. I'm trying to think how to phrase it. When we talk about affordable housing or any of the parameters that we're looking, we've got idealistic goals and demographic-based goals. How do you push a developer or anyone who wants to set up a certain use down that path? How much leverage do you have? Do we have? Does the town board have?
Limited. You can't force them to build affordable. You can certainly incentivize it. You can ask. You can explain the need for it. But as far as making somebody do it, you can't legally require it. So part of it is an educational component and some of it is just hoping for the best. Frequently, we find that it's a negotiation. It's negotiation. I'm going to say that the problem is nationwide. It's not specific to here. Certainly the county has done a fairly good job of determining how many structures are needed for the next 3 to 5 years. And they sort of set a number. The plan is not to put every last one of them here. It's countywide. But I'm certainly going to say that we talk about it a lot. We spend probably half of every staff meeting having that exact discussion and ways that we can talk to people about it. Because part of creating we are a growing community, and when you're creating a growing community, you want other people to want to come experience it with you. It's not just a group. It's all the groups.
If I may add, another portion of it that may not solve it, but surely helps to alleviate it, to make it a bit more viable is to look at the typology of housing. Is it more affordable to have denser homes, or is it more affordable to have spread out single family homes? And oftentimes the answer to that question is the denser a community is, the better it is in terms of affordability, the better it is in terms of connectivity, in terms of being able to have different amenities in terms of shopping, parks, and all of these things that makes a community what it is. You go to a farmland and everything is 5-10 acres apart. It's kind of hard to put school buses and parks and all these things there because it's just far. Then you have to look at the cost of land and the cost of running infrastructure, which drives everything through the roof. So ultimately, the denser a community can be, oftentimes the better it is. But in my humble opinion, and my opinion alone, in many cases, apartments or the rental of apartments is a great stepping stone, but it may not necessarily be an answer towards home ownership, because you still at the end of it don't own that specific place, and you still need to find 20% to put towards a down payment for something. But so it's kind of a wicked problem in many ways. That answers the question.
Be interesting to see like, the home ownership, how many of those are individuals who live in the home versus how many of those are LLCs or groups that own these homes and rent them.
At the moment, 60% of the structures are actually owned by the people who live in.
Okay.
But I'm certainly going to say that there is a concept that I experienced in other communities that I believe its day will come here, which is a whole phenomena of build to rent. Build to rent. The Atlanta is probably the most extreme example of that.
Okay.
But I will certainly say that 2 jobs ago, I was working in a place where we had this very extravagant neighborhood that had come in. And I mean, it wasn't, certainly wasn't Chatham Park, but it was a very extravagant neighborhood with very, very high price tags. And the developer had been working with us really closely to get exactly what he wanted. And we tried very hard to use our community vision to steer him back to where we were actually trying to go. And he came into our office one day after we had a very discouraging conversation the day before and said, I sold every last one of them in an hour this morning. Oh, of course, the town manager was elated. They had a town board of commissioner meeting that night, and they told everyone who would listen. And I went home and waited about 2 days and then dropped a pin in every last one of those properties on GIS and discovered that an LLC out of Atlanta actually owned them all. And then, of course, I went to Zillow 3 days later and saw the ads for every last one of them up for rent. So, it's kind of good and it's kind of bad. I mean, it depends on what you're looking for. When I moved to the northeastern part of North Carolina, my biggest challenge was finding a single family residential with a yard. And I'm going to say that was tempered by the fact the Coast Guard had sort of called dibs on everything in the area and that every single rent was $1,050. So basically I knew going up there, my rent is going to be $1,050 at the least. And if I expect room, it's going to be more than that. So there was a real homogeneity of price, but different types of ways to live. But there was nothing where you could just say, well, I'm just going to go 2 miles out of town and there'll be plenty. No, 2 miles out of town, there was the woods. So it was there or nowhere. So I believe that one of the trends that I would certainly like to keep an eye on around here is if there is an uptick in the number of non-owner occupied structures, because that's if you're my age, that makes you panicky. If you're Jenna's age, it makes you excited. People are having a lot of adventures. And certainly one of the things that goes with home ownership, as I've been reminded, having just bought a house 5 years ago, having spent about 15 years renting, is the night the water heater stopped working. I had to call the landlord. So I looked in the mirror and the landlord and said, you have to take care of this right now. So I got a little spoiled from 15 years of picking up the phone and saying, you have 2 hours to get over here. Doesn't work when I tell myself that.
Is there any other question pertaining to that?
I just have a request. Could we get a copy of those slides?
Yes.
Really helpful, especially that one with the consistencies. That was really great criteria when we're looking at proposals. So thank you for all of that.
The data was very enlightening. I don't know what
Yeah,
personally I
it
could
was.
do with it.
But it was very enlightening though to see some of the data that you have as you come over.
Yeah, I wouldn't have had a clue.
Question?
About 12 years ago, 14 years ago, we bought our property in Pittsburgh and we spent about a week here. We bought it. And on the webpage, it was advertising for retired people come to Pittsburgh, beautiful place. I didn't see a whole lot presented about retirees moving into Pittsburgh or into our region.
We have Del Webb getting ready to in their construction, they're 55 and older. There are two other projects that we have been talking about at the scoping stage that involve entirely that. One of the issues with age restricted is, of course, Fair Housing Act. You really can't. And one of the errors that a lot of people make when they put together an age restricted place, I've lived in two since I bought my first house. And in each case, I was under 50, considerably under 50. I was under 40 the first time I moved into one. And we're lucky we don't have any kids and there was nobody to play outside. But what I did discover was that every single night when I came home, my driveway was full of tricycles and bicycles. There were kids and online skating. And it wasn't unusual to pull up into my cul-de-sac and find a sort of an ad hoc basketball game going on where two people had pulled in portable hoops. And I mentioned to the HOA at the HOA meeting, I said, they had one for renters, believe it or not. And I was just a little concerned. I said, where's the play area for the kids? And they said, oh, this place is deed restricted for 55 and up. And I said, how would you go about enforcing that? They said, sue each other. I said, well, that's a problem. So what I discovered was that they had left out amenities like walking trails or things for kids to do. And in that one neighborhood, there were 1,500 houses, and there was something on the order of about 900 kids. So imagine yourself with 900 children who are completely full of energy and nowhere for them to play because they live in an age-restricted neighborhood. Mentioned it to the person who was renting to us, and she said, yeah, I can't do that.
Yeah, but how does it fit into our future land plans here in Pittsburgh?
Perfect. I'm glad you said that. And that leads us right into the second portion of the presentation. If I may,
I jumped ahead of you, I guess.
No. Your timing is impeccable. I'm talking about time. I'll start my timer again for.
Good day,
Are you moving into the second item here then?
Yes.
Okay.
So to jump on the question you said just now, what about future planning? Probably my first week here in Pittsburgh, I drove from, well, two things. One, you came down west business and you're like, oh, it's really pretty. It's very, very green, very vegetative. Then you drive from like about Mosaic down towards the turn circle. And you're like, oh, this is interesting. It goes from very new to Randy's age, very old, right? And then you're like, where is the middle? Kind of missing. I had no idea what to do with that. And it's kind of the same thing here. We gave you all a lot of information. You may not know what to do with it right now, but hopefully we can sit on it and let us marinate. And there's another plan in front of you. You would be able to say, hey, is this consistent? Does this help to achieve our goals, our objectives, our targets? Does this help to suffice the needs for kids? Does it help to suffice the need for an elderly person? As a planner, I like looking at planning concepts, planning theories. A good one is 8 to 80 concept. The idea behind it is if a place is good enough for an 8-year-old and it's good enough for an 80-year-old, and it's good enough for everyone. And that's one of the more leading concepts behind urban planning in the current scheme of things. So in that missing between Mosaic and downtown, where it transitioned from a brand new to a very older place, it kind of begs to have some sort of storyline in the middle that helps us to go through those emotions of new to old. And so we decided, or we were looking at it from a scenic overlay standpoint, and we said, hey, two things we need to do. One, we need to try to set something in place to protect the current vegetation that are there when you're going from 64 East and 64 West, to ensure that when you're coming into the town, it's still green, it's still beautiful, but there's a transition within it. And two, we need to develop or plan for the future and try to establish some sort of overlay that allows you to transition from a new development to an older development in an almost seamless manner. as opposed to go, like this. They're just like chop. And so we decided that we were going to look at the possibility of a scenic overlay district, which adds restrictions to the development, but also protects. Sorry, I'm jumping in. Go ahead. The purpose and goal. What are we looking at to establish within this scenic district? Read off the table. The scenic corridor overlay district is established to enhance and protect the visual appeal of certain thoroughfares in the town of Pittsboro. Additionally, it should provide a sense of arrival via a smooth transitional zone for residents and visitors traveling the major entrance roads and gateway to the town. What is our goals? The goal of this district is to protect and or to enhance the scenic value of the corridors through the developmental standards. Lastly, these standards will preserve the character of the town by providing an aesthetically appealing experience for those traveling the corridor, provide multimodal transportation options for travel, and to ensure a safe transportation corridor for motorists, bicyclists, and of course, pedestrians. So what we're trying to do is protect the aesthetic value. We're trying to improve transportation options, but we're also trying to build and design for the future by protecting the land and to, in some ways, program the land for the next 10 to 15 years. That's effectively what we're hoping to accomplish here. Now, this leads us to two things. The first one is the East and West Street corridor. That's 64 Business East and West. And what we're trying to do here is we are trying to create vegetative buffer zones. Now, we're looking at two areas. One, a high area of vegetation, and two, an intermediate area of vegetation. Because as well, you cannot go from very, very vegetative to no vegetation at all. There should be some sort of transition zone between high vegetation and low vegetation, right? In the area of high vegetation, we term HAV or HAV. Within this district, the following standards may apply. The following standards apply, sorry, not me. A 50-foot buffer with limited use. This corridor may be used for passive recreation or bona fide agricultural use. No building constructions, no parking, no land disturbance activities, no signs, tree removal, lighting, other than street lighting approved, provided by the town or the North Carolina DOT. And driveway or private road lighting provided by said lighting is fully provided by full cutoff fixtures, right? So this is within the high area of vegetation. You want to protect that natural, very beautiful vegetative zone. In the intermediate area of vegetation, we're going to reduce those restrictions. We're going to make it a little bit more lax. So within this intermediate area of vegetation, we're looking to drop it from a 50-feet buffer to a 30-feet buffer that helps us to reduce or to transition. This corridor may be used for passive recreation and agriculture. We're also seeing a 50% increase in required landscaping as outlined in 5.4 of the UDO. What this does is that this helps us to go from very, very strong vegetation to more like not ornamental, like planting and those other sorts of things. Sorry, the word I look. See, no building construction. A maximum of 50% allowable parking may occur within this buffer. So you can have some sort of activity within this buffer zone because again, the idea is to transition. As is allowed within this UDO, no more than 50% of tree clearance. Again, why? Because we want to be able to reduce. No monuments nor highway signs, no other signs are permitted. Other signs are permitted with 50% increased vegetation. So we're saying now we go from one high vegetated area where you can't do no sort of land clearing. We want to keep it as vegetative as possible to an area where there's like a half of that. And we're allowing certain development within that zone, but that development has to be with increased vegetation to improve the quality of that area. The town was also in discussions about creation of a linear park along 64 east or west, Randy? West?
East.
West. East. Sorry.
West
East.
is this side.
Okay, east. to do the creation of a linear park along that set, and this would help to improve or to qualify that linear park in that zone. There's also a reduction in the lighting allowance within this zone. And of course, the streets and driveways that are provided by the ordinance or that by DOT. This is the area that we're looking at. Yellow would indicate, so on the top is east and on the bottom is the west. The yellow would be the high area vegetation and the green would be intermediate area vegetation. Whereas at the bottom, again, yellow, green, high and intermediate. What it does is that the higher is located in the more outer fringes of the town, ETJ and town boundaries. And then it transitions to a smaller area of intermediate vegetation closer or as you move closer towards the town. So it has that transition, kind of like a taper or a fade into the town. Question.
Can you hold off just a second, Eric, so we can digest this? And please repeat the dark green versus the yellowish green.
Yellow, the yellow is the high area of vegetation.
Okay.
That is where we're looking at a 50-foot buffer.
Mhm.
And the green is an intermediate 30-foot buffer that would
Okay.
allow some sort of development with it.
Okay, thank you.
Questions?
I was just saying, they look the same width and stuff. Is that
That's,
a general?
yeah, that's
Okay.
just, that's, please don't take that
No, that's
as
okay.
per scale.
And the, excuse me, the buffers are based off of the right of way, correct?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yes. May I continue? Okay, done. Let me start my timer back. So that concludes the portion with vegetation. Now we're looking at Hillsborough Street. What we're hoping to do with Hillsborough Street is to create that transition. And we dubbed it a modern and a historic transition zone. And the idea behind that, in the modern transition zone, within this district, the following are applicable. We're saying we would request 150-foot buffer zone, and the following uses would not be permitted within that buffer zone. Drive-through, car wash, fast food restaurants, food trucks, gas stations, car dealerships, vehicle repair, auto repair stores, retail, generally over 60,000 feet. The reason for these, and these are subject to change based on the future development of this proposed ordinance. The idea is to keep businesses that are everywhere and kind of makes a place more cluttered or a place to look not as aesthetically pleasing, or some place that you're proud to say, hey, this is my home, come visit us. The first thing you see when you're driving through is 10 car parking lots or a rec yard and these things. You want to protect that value coming into your town. We're also saying, because we're not trying to be completely crazy and completely egregious, what we're doing is that 150 buffer zone, these are not allowed. Other businesses are allowed within that zone. B is asking for a 50-foot buffer zone where no building construction can happen, but a maximum of 50% allowable parking may occur within the zone. We're also saying that there is a 50% increase in the buffer landscaping requirements. C, there's a 75% increase in the overall landscaping requirements per the UDO. And the facade, we're looking more at a modern type facade, right? The idea again is not to restrict development within these zones, but to protect the visual or the aesthetic quality and appeal, that which also helps to drive up property values and also help to make it a place you prefer calling home. Next. The historic transition zone, what we wanted to do is, because modern are oftentimes more dense and a bit more things happening, within the historic, we wanted to preserve that a little bit more to kind of drive you through that era. So with that, we're saying there's an increase from 150 to 200 buffer, where again, we're not going to allow for drive-through, car washes, fast food restaurants, food trucks, gas stations, car dealerships, vehicle repair, building exceeding 35 foot, because oftentimes you go to a place that is historic or has a more historic character, you're not going to see a building that exceeds 35 foot. So do we want a huge building in this more historically transitioning zone? If not.
Does historic mean closer to downtown?
Yes.
Generally, okay.
Yes.
I mean,
I'll show you a map right now.
Okay, great.
B, we're then saying, remember the first one had 150 and 50, this one has 230. So within that 30-foot buffer zone, no building construction, but a maximum of 25 allowable parking may occur because we still want you to utilize your land as you should. We're also saying that there's a 50% increase in landscaping requirement if you're putting a park in there. Also a 75% overall increase in the landscaping buffer. Is this a bit more taxing on the developer? It might be, but it also helps to improve the quality and the value of the land and the overall area. And the facade is more leaning towards a more historic facade, looking at things like bricks and these other materials that were more customary to the time that these were created. Yeah. This is what we're looking at there. I just love how you all got excited when map pops up. So the purple or the as a magenta color is the modern facade. That's the one that is 150 and the 50 feet. The blue or the aqua is the more historic going towards, and it wraps right around, I had it by Chatham Marketplace, a little bit after Chatham Marketplace. I think it's Midway Street or something like that. It kind of cuts up because then, you know, it starts to program itself. The bottom is actually a great local example. This is Mosaic, right, by the gas station at Mosaic. If you look at the far left, you see where there's that proper vegetative buffer, that great setback, and there's a walkway in the bottom right, Jenna, sorry. Yeah, all of that. I was looking at the aerial view. Yeah, so that within between the road and the actual building is exactly what we're trying to recreate. And you can see it has nice vegetation, it has a nice walkway. You know, if you have kids, if you have grandkids, you and your significant other would really much prefer walking in a place like this if you're going from Mosaic to downtown Pittsburgh. The principal reason why we wanted to create this is most naturally somebody's going to come to Pittsburgh, whether now or in the future, and not solely go to downtown Pittsburgh. I remember when I was looking for the job here in Pittsburgh, and I was like, let me see what is in Pittsburgh. And I went on Google Maps, like all of us younger people would do. And I went from where the police station was, and I kind of stopped right at the turn circle, and then I went up a little bit more to where the lot of animals and those things are out in front on Hillsborough Street.
Mhm.
That's kind of where it stopped for me. I was like, I guess this is a very small town. There's nothing more. Until the first day I came to the for the job, and Ronnie took me around, and I was like, where did all this come from? Because I never knew there was Chatham Park within it. But for me, the lesson there was not something that told me there is more beyond this. And that's kind of what we want to prevent. If somebody comes to Pittsburgh, we want them to go to Mosaic, but also understand that there's more this way. And if they go to downtown Pittsburgh, we want to also understand that there's more that way. And that's really what we're trying to achieve in this.
Will there be a southern version as well? Heading out 15501 south?
Going towards Sanford.
I would want to speculate, yes.
I don't have it in the plan here.
Currently, that's not something that we have talked about it, but not.
I have a question.
Yes.
How long do you figure that it's gonna take for this to happen?
For us to get the plans approved, for us to get the ordinance through this, we would have to bring it back to you all next planning board meeting.
I mean, for it to make any physical change,
So,
the town in the area.
great, perfect. I'm glad you asked that question because this is exactly why we're trying to get it through. If, for instance, a developer comes in, can you where it meets between blue and the purple? If someone comes in right now and decides they're going to build out that entire area, there is nothing stopping them from doing it how they want or how is allowed within the UDO, right? So right now, what we're trying to allow is that if anyone comes in after this is passed, let's say we pass this today, and the Board of Commissioners pass it tomorrow, they have 90 days where they can still choose between this or what was prior to. Once that is done, any development that comes in after has to conform to this new standard. So the question is, we can really have this within the next 4 months and start seeing this come to fruition. But if the longer we take, the more we push that back and the more risk we run of having development along this zone that doesn't conform to this. Yes,
My only concern, I've been here 36 years.
yes.
There hasn't been a nickel worth of change between Lowe's and downtown since I've been here. The majority of people live there are low income, fixed income. They ain't going nowhere. They don't want to go nowhere. They don't want anybody messing with them.
I agree, and that's why for me and for us, it was important to talk about future planning. Because those individuals may not want that. My good friend here, he said when he came to buy in Pittsburgh, you know, he spent a week, but I'm pretty sure within that week, he could not fathom there was going to be a Chatham Park. A year ago, we could not fathom that there was going to be an Asteria, right? And so we need to plan and protect what we see route, not for now, but also for the future, and to try to prevent things or to try to protect development and encourage development in a way that it comes in. So they may not have wanted to change, or they may not still want to change, but their kids, when they do pass away, may have a totally different mentality. And we need to ensure that what we want is not impeded there, based on those changes. Question?
Yeah, to add on to it, 15501 South is probably one of the most historic areas in the town. Why wouldn't we want to include that in this plan at this time? Is there a reason why we don't want to do that?
No, I would absolutely want to include it. We just had not.
Not that far yet.
Yeah.
I got that far yet.
Or. Yes,
It's that part of Pittsburgh on here too, not just straight down.
Well, we've
Empire
already,
87.
we've already got two developments going in that
I
area
know.
right now.
Okay, yeah, Jenna wants to comment.
For the south part, when we were looking at the corridor, like corridor coming in, we want to make sure that we're tailoring it to that area. We didn't want kind of like a one
Yeah.
shoe, like one size fits all. We want to make sure that we're really taking the time to craft it, and we just didn't have quite enough time. But we also want to get this out there so we can start getting input and vetting it, so that way for the south side, we're doing it right. So that was feedback and takeaway from this.
I think I'm gonna assume by what you said, Eric, that anything that we would do moving forward would not encumber an existing resident or business owner, right?
Unless they choose to change substantially. And that is great because we want to still allow people to do what they're doing. But 5 years, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, they may change ownership, or they may decide they're gonna sell and they want to develop. We need them to, you ever walked on a street and there's a sidewalk going this way, there's a sidewalk coming this way, and then there's just nothing in the middle?
Mhm.
This is what we're trying to protect, to ensure that whomsoever comes in has to meet that middle. And that's effectively what we want to do. We're just hoping to make it pretty.
Yeah, and that's what's happened in some of the developments, like when the older development over here past Chatham Mills. And then when the other development came in, they didn't want to join the highways, the roads together. So it took a while before they could get to that, but it took like years for them to agree to let somebody drive through that part of the neighborhood.
Indeed.
They didn't want them to, but it was it made sense for them to join, to go from one end to the other. And now the ones that live over there, Chatham Forest, they use it religiously, but the other Springdale, they was like, no, we don't want y'all coming through here.
Yeah.
But it is.
Yeah, and one of the misconception that we conjured up is that people might say it's going to impact my property value, or it's going to impact my buildability on this land. We're not trying to stop you from building. What we're trying to do is to improve the quality of the area in terms of the aesthetic and functionality of it. But we're also trying to ensure that the development we do not want to see in our town are not within the most obvious portions of the town. You know, we don't really want things that doesn't really help us to be a more aesthetically pleasing or safe place to be, or something that we're proud to say, hey, this is home. Yes.
When you talk about high area vegetation versus intermediate area vegetation and stuff, how is that measured? Because like that example right there, those are little bushes and stuff. That's different than a 80-year-old oak tree or 200-year-old oak tree and stuff.
Yeah, so this wouldn't be
Yeah.
within that
Yeah.
vegetated area here. That would be a totally different section. And honestly, I don't know the answer to that right now. And that is something that we're still hoping to get guidance, not just from the planning board, but for other members of the community to see how best we can do this. Again,
Right.
we are in some ways the expert, but we take direction from the board and we take direction from our community members. And so that is ideally how we want to do it, where it's a bottom-up approach to making these decisions and to plan that is with people and not for people. Sorry, that doesn't really kind of answer your
No,
question.
it's good. We're not sure yet, but that's
Yeah.
stays to be defined.
Yeah.
I also think like these trees will get bigger.
Oh, yeah, I know, but a 4-inch diameter tree versus, putting.
Sure, but you can't really plant like a,
No, you can't
Yeah,
plant. You can't, they can prevent it from being cut down.
yeah.
So would it be kind of like a like an opacity difference
Hmm.
then?
Sorry, go ahead.
It's fine. So the high level and the intermediate, would it basically just be an opacity difference
Yes.
essentially? Okay.
So I just want to clarify that the high area vegetation and the lower vegetation is not what we're looking at here.
Right, that's in the,
But yes, it would be an opacity difference where we're trying to, if you can't see through it now, within the high, when you go to intermediate, you'll be able to see a little bit more through it. And as you go more in town, you should not have that issue with it at all. Further questions? Comments?
I have a question. Are there other towns that have these corridors that you could
Very much so.
give us an example of, like, Apex has that?
Not Apex. I was gonna say, I put the one together for Creedmoor. The one
Okay.
that's in Creedmoor. Runs the entire length of 56 and 15. Not 50. 50 was too late, but 15 was still largely vegetated. That's the area that takes you over to Budner. And this Budner's over here, you're heading over toward Wake Forest in the other direction. So certainly one of the things that we were trying to do there was to keep it somewhat wooded and to retain some of the character, have the development, but have it back a little bit.
Yeah.
Also, we were trying to preserve affordability there. That would be one of the other not so obvious pieces of this. Yes, there are other towns. I was going to say, I was actually talking to NCDOT today in regards to some of what Apex has done. And in their case, it has to do with limited access to the highway. So in their case, it's a deliberate attempt to cut down the number of points that something is in connection with the highway. That happens when you're building a new road. You don't have a new road, then you basically have to go in and install inside of your ordinances ways to cut down on access
I'm
points.
sorry, thank you.
Okay.
Another area is Apex. That's one that we utilize to somewhat scope this presentation.
I started the initial research, so I have more information on this. We actually started with High Point and then we dove into Apex, and Apex is a little confusing because they have the DOT portion, but then within more of the town limits, they have a neighborhood one. We also looked at Elon and a couple counties, Durham City and County had some corridor language, and then Moore County also had some language. So we tried to look at the areas around, but we found at least like 10, 15 municipalities nearby that had language that was mostly gateway or scenic corridor to kind of prevent the entrances into the town to really like show people that they've arrived to wherever they are.
I think the folks that are building Turkey Creek also have developments in Elon, and High Point and Sanford and stuff. It'd be interesting to see how they behave with those restrictions are those realities that, so I'm not sure where they are in those projects, but.
Do you have group pictures showing us a transition from low, medium?
I don't think.
Downtown
but I did
area?
Make a note to include that in future presentations. So I was jotting down the questions.
Just nice to be able to look at something and see a transition.
Yes,
in those
yes.
live
I'm looking for it now,
presentation.
though.
I made a note to include that in future presentations to give a good visual of what we're picturing.
Yeah, I'd like to see it too.
Since you already have the research, if you could tell us where to drive,
Yeah,
like what roads would, we could, in the month interim, we could
We-
try to get to some of those
But
places.
from Durham, so we like, she had our daily commutes and we're like, oh, did you drive by this one random road with this one random sign? So we're still working on pinpointing down some
Okay.
specifics, but absolutely, we can work on that. And we also can share some of the town language that we've pulled from, if that's helpful too.
Yes.
How
Yeah,
how are you approaching the fact that you've eliminated half the roads coming into Pittsburgh?
Sorry?
You haven't done 87, you haven't done Moncur Road, you haven't done 902.
Yes.
Where are we? I mean, why would we do just,
So that's kind of comes.
Wow.
we're all approaching down?
And I can take that.
Okay,
So let me take that one.
okay.
The reason for this particular group being chosen is that the majority of the development and the proposals for development that are coming into our office directly
I
impact
know,
those areas.
I just ask.
It's a good question.
Yes.
That's the.
I mean, Turkey Creek's on Moncur Road.
I'm sorry?
And it,
We've already
Yes.
been through the process.
There-
Del Webb ties into Moncur Road.
They're done. I'm saying
Yes.
they're done. They would not be subject.
So the,
Okay.
I know.
How do we protect? How do we do this and still protect the rights of the individuals that are already there?
I don't don't know if this would adversely impact them because they are protected as long as they don't do no major egregious changes to the development. They can do whatever it is that they want to, they continue to do what they want to do because they're vested, they are grandfathered in per se. But the moment they're going to do major development, which maybe to put a Walmart or to put a big Starbucks or something. But
so with the map that we're looking at, with some of the single family houses, as you get closer to the town limits, if there was like 5, 10 houses where they all just want to stay single family houses, they can do that for the next 50, 100, 200 years. If a developer wanted to buy all of those lots and change it, that's when it would trigger it.
Yeah.
So as long as they want to keep just living in their house, they can do that as long as they want.
Okay.
This won't change anything for them.
Just ask.
Absolutely, no, it's a great question, and this is why we brought it to you, is we want feedback. We kind of hit a point where we're like, okay, well, this is what we think, but we're only so many people.
yeah, yes.
You used the term grandfather.
Uh-huh.
And I'm a little lost on that term, the way it's used in the town of Pittsburgh. An example is a concrete factory on Small Street. We first came in, I looked at the amount of traffic that was there. And you had very few concrete trucks and aggregate trucks moving back and forth. Since Chatham Park come in, they doubled in size. I did not see any information, any meetings for the people, anything. And when I tried to even look up into the records, I guess the records are missing or something through Chatham, or I guess the Chatham County got hacked and they lost a lot of information or something to that degree. How does grandfathering figure into this?
Yeah, so in this case, if they keep the same use, if they keep the same use generally within relative size of what is the existing footprint, then there is very little that the new policies or new ordinances can do to affect them as they are grandfathered or vested in. When they come in to do major change is when then we would be able to say, hey, you are not conforming, you're not meeting the standards of what the current or the modern standards are. But if they don't change that use much, then it's hard for us to hold them accountable for any other, or to hold them accountable to a higher level because that's not applicable to when they developed.
But if someone already owns something, I understand the grandfathering clause, but are they allowed to double in size? Still doing the same function.
Density, same footprint, but like double density, you mean? Or-
Well, putting all new equipment,
Yeah,
making
get there.
a new building.
And then,
I mean, there was major construction going on. I'm just wondering, I'm trying to understand the grandfather clause.
I thought most of those are zoned RA, if I'm not mistaken. So we're talking about a rezone and a totally different use.
It's actually, I think, commercial.
We're talking about the concrete plant.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm talking about this now versus your.
I'm looking at the grandfather clause.
Well, actually, that would not be applicable to let's say that you were a concrete plant, you're operating as a concrete plant, you stay as a concrete plant, suddenly you get considerably more business. The only area where grandfathering versus some new zoning activity would come in place would be if you were trying to enlarge the structures on the site. If you aren't making the site any larger, if you're not doing anything more than taking on more production, then you're simply practicing capitalism.
But if you increase the size of your batch plants and then put on new buildings and everything else,
The buildings would be the place where you would be, but of course, that would assume that the regulation had changed. If the regulations haven't changed, then there's nothing to, there's nothing really to work with. If you have, grandfathering is a situation where you have something that has become non-conforming because you have changed the law. In the case of that place, if nothing in the way it was originally permitted or nothing in the way it was originally done has changed significantly that would make continuing it or enlarging it a problem, then it doesn't affect it.
so that's the same.
It's more a matter of, let's say that you had a concrete plant. I'm more concerned, in my head, the example would be the one on Moncure, Pittsburgh, the one closest to, I'm thinking of the one closest to Potterstone and Turkey Creek. If they were to take the existing facility and want to turn in a permit and want to double or triple, not the output, but what actually the buildings, the physical footprint of the place. That's the point where we would be looking at any regulations that have changed since then. If no regulations change, then basically it's just a matter of can you meet it within the setbacks.
But wouldn't that go in front of the planning board? And
Somebody
Department?
increasing the number of batches or somebody?
No, increasing the equipment that would allow you to increase the number of batches. In other words, you put in all new equipment, maybe a couple.
No, I think that it would just be a matter of site plan approval, which is done.
And then we would look at the consistencies that we talked about earlier to see that it meets the setbacks, it makes the new current UDO, it meets the future plans and those sorts of things.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't come in front of you all.
Yeah, because I'm wondering what other things can do in the future. That was just an example,
Yeah.
the only one I knew of, so.
I think anything new would have to meet regulation.
Yes, precisely. I like to think of planning as if you go to a place and it looks pretty and you like the way how this place looks, it's often because people in your position and people in our position made that legislation possible for that development to occur. You never go to somewhere pretty and unless you're in nature and it's just like, hey, God said, let this be here and that's there. Otherwise, it comes down to people in your position and people in our position in the BOC to say, this is what we want this area to look like in the future. And that's kind of what we're hoping to do with these corridors. Yes.
I have a question about the language that will be included around the facades, historic versus modern. How much control will there be there?
We would,
Actual building materials, colors, that kind of thing.
yeah, well, maybe not as far as colors. If you've ever seen or if you've ever interacted with some of the historic districts, they would tell you, for instance, you can't use vinyl or you can't use aluminum clad, or these are the preferred building type materials. Those are the details that we would have to go into a lot more. But due to our work constraints in terms of the amount of development that is coming in now and the time that we would try to get this in front of you, we weren't successfully able to flesh that out. But that is definitely something. So if you all, for instance, would go and say over the next couple of days, hey, I like this, I don't like this, this is more modern, this is more historic, please let us know. We're here to take guidance from you all and to include that within it. But that would definitely be the way that we would control the facade.
Okay.
What's the pleasure of the board tonight? Do you want to ponder this more, take action? I guess we have several ways we can go. Now I did hear, Jenna, you talked about some future plans or things. Are they going to be related to different intersections or different corridors or more on this one?
We started with this one, with these corridors, but if this is something that has board support, both planning board and board of commissioners, and so it generally seems to have town support, then that would be where we look into other corridors.
Okay.
As Randy said, we have the most, like the scoping and pre-submittal meetings that we have been primarily for the map.
Right.
The screen, so that was the focus of this.
And then also in conjunction with these and the one that Jenna had presented last time, we are definitely hoping to have Jenna and other staff in front of the boards. Because we realize there is a need to continually updating the UDO as well as the different plans. And so one of our primary objective right now is to create as much maps as we possibly can that help us to make more concise and accurate decision, and also to update our languages that would allow us to have the power to enact things that we want to see and to prevent things that are not in line with the plans and are not consistent with what we want.
So primarily tonight, the assignment is to either decide that you would like to send this out for potential adoption as it is. If you would like to make suggestions as to how you would like to see it altered before the next meeting, or to pick the matter back up next meeting with, hopefully, I mean, it's going to be very hard for us to work in a vacuum, so you're certainly going to need to make suggestions.
Right, okay.
So that's the choices on the table.
You've all heard from the director. What's the pleasure?
Well, it sounds like time is crucial, like we want to get this pushed through. And so I think it's really great what you guys have done. And thank you for taking initiative on this. So I think we should approve it and move it forward.
Would you like to put that in the form of a motion?
I move to approve this plan, corridor plan.
We got approval from Charity Mize.
I'll second it.
And a second from Frida. Is there any further discussion? Realize we'll be looking at the Ginger, could you bring up the consistency statement there? Is it on your piece? I know it's in our packet. Proposed text amendment is consistent with the land use plan because it advances the visions and goals, encourages development pattern and it transitions and anyway. Y'all read it right. The text amendment is reasonable and a public interest and will benefit the community by aesthetic regulations, incorporate urban design standards, and encourage environmentally friendly practices, and supports the long-term sustainability and supports the implementation of the land use plan. I babbled through that in a hurry, but that's the consistency statement that we are, hey.
There it is.
So I'm sorry, the request is that we make a modification at the staff.
Yeah, the request would be for you to retract your motion and then to make a motion to approve with modification by staff. So that we can add the facades and those other sorts of.
Gotcha. I retract my motion to approve this as is, and then I move to approve it with modifications by staff.
And I'll second it again.
Okay. The motion's been revised for the allowance of staff to bring in the there's a key word there.
Facades.
The facades, yes. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, we'll call for a vote. All in favor of the
Aye.
motion, signify by saying aye.
Yep. Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Okay, the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Move to the town board. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
That's looks like a beautiful thing
Yeah,
to me.
awesome.
They gotta be look a lot more, lot better.
Next on the agenda.
One fairly big update and then we're done, unless you all have individual comments.
Right.
So I was just going to point out that the board did approve the addition of one additional member to the planning board. And so we're going to be working through the process, we'll put out application requests. Obviously, previously accepted applications will be included in the group of who's going to be up for the position. But yeah, so it did go through. Did want you all to know that. So if you have anybody who's not throwing their hat in the ring and wants to throw their hat in the ring, no time like the minute it gets advertised.
Thank you, Randall.
That's what I got.
And also backing up, maybe, you know, in the meantime or anytime really that you have comments for things like Eric was presenting, Randall, doesn't matter. You know, send them an email and say, this is, you know, I've seen this or we're talking about this. So as much as encouragement or information as we can feed them, I think the better they're able to do their jobs, I believe so. Okay, any comments, anything from any board members about any item?
Yeah, okay.
All right, this may,
I make a motion, we'll adjourn then.
thank you. We have a motion to adjourn. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, you get Eric back next month.
Don't need a vote on.
Big
don't need a vote.
Great car.